Lamed Aleph, 34a. So we began a little bit of this Gemara yesterday. We're going to back up a bit. Yesterday we covered the issue of an elevator being a base shar, being like an antechamber in the service of another room, and the room that the elevator is leading to, or in the Gemara's case, this room with a ladder inside of it, basically. The last page, yeah. Itmar, it's the fourth line, first word. So yesterday we discussed the room that has the ladder in it, with respect to, which we'll review now, with respect to entering as an antechamber leading to another house. And we talked a little bit about that. And today we're going to get to the next half of that very statement, which is the issue of one room having more than one door. And you'll remember we related it back to a previous Gemara with respect to Rabbi, who had a private door to the Beis HaMedrash, to the shul. So it's going to be connected to that, and I'm going to try to make sense of all the different opinions here and see if we can come to something. Okay, so let's learn the Gemara itself. The first half we kind of went through yesterday, so we're going to push through it, and we're going to go to the second half. So Itmar, we learnt Lul Pasuach, an opening of a hole in the ground. Menabayis Lalia, which extends from the top floor to the bottom floor. In Rashi's version at least. There's two apartments, upstairs and downstairs, and there's a hole in the floor between the two apartments, and there's a ladder extending from the top to the bottom through that hole, and each of the people at the bottom of the ladder and the top of the ladder have walls completely encircling that ladder, and one door. So it's not a room, it's not a living room, no one lives inside of a ladder, but that room with the ladder inside serves as an entrance, an antechamber to the room that is obligated in Mezuzah, which is the two homes that are on top floor and bottom floor.
Like an attic?
Imagine if someone was living in an attic.
People do it. People climb ladders to go to an attic.
Yeah, something like that. But the ladder on the bottom is in an enclosed room.
Yeah.
So you have to open the door to get into the ladder, and then when you get upstairs, you're in an enclosed room, and you open the door to get into the rest of the attic.
Like
and the idea is separating the two apartments.
It's almost like an antiquated elevator system.
That's right. That's why.
I mean, it's just instead of a movable, it's you.
You walking up the ladder versus hydraulically being pushed up. Yeah, which is why Blau rules that elevators need Mezuzas. That's why he rules that, based on this Gemara.
It must be steps too, not be ladder.
It could be steps too.
Yeah, it could be steps.
But what's interesting is that the way Rashi describes it, the entrance, the bottom, and the top are right on top of each other, as opposed to extended like that on an angle. Right, which makes them sound mamish like an elevator.
Right.
In other words, you might say that because, one could argue that if it was just the steps and it was far away, maybe you have the extended amois making it into a kind of room, whereas here, there's nothing, the two doors are on top of each other, not...
Except when you have an elevator system like this, where it's not exactly, it has an extension outward.
But it's still directly on top of the door. Well, yeah, the room on the bottom is directly on top.
It is directly, but it's...
The door is in a different location, but the room is on top of each other. Two rooms that you're putting...
Yeah, for sure.
The two rooms you're putting a mezuzah on.
Yeah.
In the case of Rashi, neither of only the bottom one has a floor. The top one doesn't have a floor. In Rashi's version, if it's a staircase, then each of them have a floor, kind of, which makes this Rashi's understanding of what this is mamish very like an elevator here, except that one's hydraulic and one's you walking up a ladder.
Right.
At any rate, says the Gemara, if it has two entrances, the way Rashi understands it, two entrances mean one at the top, one at the bottom. Is required for two mezuzahs, one on the top, one on the bottom, because each of these rooms serve as an antechamber to the room that you're going into, to the apartment that you're going into, either downstairs or upstairs. Okay. Amar Papa. Now we come to the Gemara that we're going to be discussing today a little bit more at length. Amar Papa said, Shma mina, we can infer from here, Mid Rav Huna, from the law of Rav Huna, namely, that this room has two doors, and they both get a mezuzah. So what we can infer is, Hai in deruna, this room, whatever that room is, some kind of room, the Ispe Arba Babi, which has four entrances, Chayav Arba Mezuzahs, it's obligated in four mezuzahs. How is this derived from Rav Huna's din?
Are we still talking about that?
No.
No? Okay.
Just a room that has four doors. How do we derive it? Presumably we derive it. It's a little bit difficult, and some of the commentaries talk about what's the relationship between the two laws. A room with four doors and elevator room with a door on top and a door on the bottom. But presumably, the way we derive it is, on the simple reading, is that the previous room had 2 doors, and we don't say 1 mezuzah per room. In other words, one could have argued that the law of the mezuzah is not on the door, but on the room. And if it's on the room, then once the room has mezuzah, what do I have to have more mezuzahs for? The room already has one, even though it has more doors. One could have argued that. And therefore the Gemara says, we derive from here that even though it has more than 1 door, it still requires a mezuzah. From the fact that the Gemara said before, mezuzah on the bottom, mezuzah on the top, even though ostensibly it's the same room. So likewise here, you have a room with 4 doors, 4 mezuzahs. But because of what I just told you, the Gemara asks, Pshita, this is obvious. Why shouldn't you have it? The Torah says, put it on the doorposts of your home. It doesn't say to put it on the rooms of your home. Doorposts. So you have 4 doorposts, put it on 4 doorposts. What's the big question? So the Gemara, no, like tzricha. We need this law. It's not so obvious that 4 doors need a mezuzah. It's not such an obvious thing. In what case is it not obvious? Afagav deragel b'chad, even though you're only accustomed to using 1 door. So even if you're only accustomed to using 1 door, and the other doors are used less, you still have to get a mezuzah on all 4 of them. So what's the law what's the chidush, what's the novelty of this law? Not that doors need mezuzahs, but that doors that aren't in use still need mezuzahs. Yeah. So the simple reading of this Gemara, and this way the Rambam rules, that the Gemara is telling you that if you have doors, whether or not you use them is not relevant. Don't use them, doesn't matter, still gets mezuzah. This is the Rambam's reading, it's the most simple reading.
Didn't we have a case where if you had 2 doors?
There's the problem. The problem is that this Gemara runs in contrast to a previous Gemara. The previous Gemara on the previous page talked about Rabbi, who had a door going from his home to the Beis Medrash, to the study hall, and it said he didn't have a mezuzah. Now the question is, why didn't he have a mezuzah? So one way of learning it is the reason why he didn't have a mezuzah is because it was going to a study hall. So that law has no bearing, because it's an exclusive entrance for him to the study hall, therefore it doesn't get a mezuzah, right? We discussed whether or not the study hall needs a mezuzah, it's considered a living space. So if the issue in that Gemara is that if the primary concern there is that it's a study hall, then that Gemara has no bearing on this Gemara. And that seems to be the way Rambam learns. So it seems to be. So that Gemara was talking about an issue of a study hall, no bearing on this Gemara. This Gemara is talking about a home. And therefore, if that's the way you're learning this Gemara, then any home that has multiple doors, doesn't matter if you use it or don't use it, what your intention was, not intention was, the door you use, you put a mezuzah. Period. That's the simple way of reading this Gemara. But Rashi, in the previous Gemara, he understood the Gemara there not to be an issue of study hall, but an issue of the fact that this door was exclusively made for one person. So now we have to settle a distinction between that Gemara and this Gemara, because they're both talking about an issue of your home, nothing to do with your study hall. Right? In Rashi's view, study halls get mezuzahs anyway. And the issue here was that it's an exclusive door for him. So had the exclusive door been in his home, the same law would have applied. It just happened to be that the case was an exclusive entrance to the study hall. But had the exclusive door been between his kitchen and his bedroom, then it also wouldn't get a mezuzah. Presumably in Rashi's understanding of the Gemara there. Now if that's the case, what does the Gemara mean here? That all doors get mezuzahs even if it's something you're not even if it's not with your primary door, even if it's not, right? So what does the Gemara mean here? That all doors get mezuzahs even if you're not rugel.
Where does the Rashi get this thing about exclusive use? Where does that come from?
From the previous Gemara. Because the previous Gemara said that Rabbi, the Gemara there says, Rabbi had a door from his house to the study hall and didn't have a mezuzah. Rav Huna had a door between his house and the study hall and did have a mezuzah. Why did Rabbi not have one and why did Rav Huna have one? So the Gemara answers, because Rabbi's door was exclusively his and Rav Huna's door was for other people also. And therefore Rashi derived from there that a door built exclusively for one person, no mezuzah. Whereas others might have learned that is only true when you're walking into a study hall. And thus when you're building an exclusive door in your own private home, you still put up mezuzah. That's what the Rambam learns it, so it seems at least. But Rashi now has to reconcile the two Gemaras. Clear? So let's look at the Rashi on the side. We're not going to learn the first Rashi, because the first Rashi is not brought in halacha. This is what you were mentioning, because when we learned the Gemara then, we learned the first Rashi to make it easier. the first a little bit of both. But so on the right hand side in the column, the line begins the word Ketipirashni, and then there's the bold words Aleph, Ayin, Gimel, Alfagav. Yeah, you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Alfagav derech b'chad. The Gemara here said that the novelty of the law of Rav Papa is that even if you have multiple doors and you only use one, they all get mezuzahs. So now Rashi says, Alfagav derech b'chad minayu, even though you're only accustomed to using one of the doors, one of the four doors in the case of Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Tvei, you use that one more than the others, you still put mezuzah on all of them. The Hada Amr Le'il, that which we have explained in the previous page. Was it 2 pages ago? Page and a half ago.
More than 2 doors, right?
Sorry, yeah. Halach Achar Ragol, we said before that you follow the majority of use, and that's why Rabbi's door didn't get a mezuzah, because it was a private door. Hani Mili, that's only in an instance, says Rashi. Going, for example, Trei Babi, if you have 2 doors. So when you have 2 doors, V'ragol b'chad, and using one, the second door, which is not in use, or not as much in use, is secondary to the original door. So in other words, in this understanding of Rashi, if you have 2 doors in a room, and one's primarily used, and the other one's not primarily used, you don't only put mezuzah on one door, even though the other one's used by at least some people. So if you had 10 people living in the house, 8 of them use one door, 2 of them use the other door. In this understanding in Rashi, for one specific room, there's one specific room that only 2 people use, and the other one that all the other 8 people use. So in Rashi's version, in this version of Rashi, that door with 2 people use would not have mezuzah. But once you have more than 2 doors, it doesn't get nullified, and all of them need mezuzah. So this understanding of Rashi, at least according to Rabbi Bloy, is not to be found in any of the halachic decisors, which means this notion of one door exempting another doesn't exist anywhere. But the second version of Rashi does find itself in the Shulchan Aruch, and we shall explain. Lishna achrina, another way of understanding it. Mechuvas HaGaonim, this comes from the response of the Gaonim. The generation of the Gaonim is the generation post Gemara, pre the move. It's post Gemara, but still in Babylonia, basically. Pre the move away from Bavel to Europe. Pre Charlemagne, essentially. So the Gaonim, the word Gaon means genius, literally. But it was reserved. The title Gaon was reserved for one who was the leader of an academy, either in Sura or Pumbedisa, the 2 famous academies which lasted for many hundreds of years, starting from I think Rav and Shmuel were the first teachers in Sura and Pumbedisa, maybe even before then. So it goes almost from the beginning of the Gemara age, which is maybe less than 100 years after the destruction of the temple, about 100 years after the destruction of the temple. The Amoraim, yeah, from the beginning of the Amoraim, all the way till almost 100 years after the Gemara ends, maybe even more. Sajid Gaon is almost more. Till the years to the 800s, to the year 800s, maybe even the 900s already, still going on. So we're talking about 600 years this yeshivas now. It's still maybe even longer. These 2 yeshivas. So the leaders of these academies were called Gaonim. Post the Gemara age, during the Gemara age, they're Amoraim still, but post the Gemara age, they got the title of Gaon. Anybody who was a leader of the academy. So there were writers of that era, but they're not referred to as the Gaon. But there are like a Sajid Gaon or a High Gaon. Any of these names where it has the title Gaon is referring to someone who's a leader of either Sura or Pumbedisa, these 2 yeshivas in Babylonia. So in the response from that age, says Rashi, we find a different explanation in understanding these 2 Gemaras. Halach Achar Ragil, when the Gemara earlier said that you put a mezuzah based on primary usage and secondary usage doesn't get a mezuzah, this means to say, you put a mezuzah on the door that people are most accustomed to going in and out. And this exempts Pischa de Rabbi, Rabbi's door, irrespective of the fact that it happens to go to a base medrash, happens to go to a study hall. But what makes the exemption? It wasn't made only for him. So in other words, the question here is not so much the usage now, but what was the intention when you built that door? If when you built this entrance, it was not meant to be an exit and entrance for everybody. It was meant specifically for one person. So it wasn't built with the intention of being an ordinary door, no mezuzah. Yeah? And that comes to exempt, and therefore, Pischa Rav Huna, and therefore Rav Huna's mezuzah doesn't get this exemption. It's exempt from this exemption, and therefore does get a mezuzah. Because it was built, even though it was Rav Huna's private door, but it was built for others as well. Clear? So the issue is, what would you have in mind when you built it? Or about 2 doors, a gimel or 3, going into one room. The kulun nasu labiyas, and they were all made with the intention of entering. Kol b'nei bayis, for all the people living there. Let's use the example of 10 people living in one house, and one door has 3-4 doors. So when they built it, the intention was everybody should use it. Shahim Merubin, there's many. There's many people living there. And there was one usage they all shared in this one room. Tadir continuously. And when they built it, they needed for it many entrances, because there was many people living and they all shared, let's say, a common dining room. So they needed a bunch of entrances from all the different small bedrooms to lead into that one dining room. And the intention was everybody's going to use all the doors. So kulon chayav mezuzah, they're all require mezuzah. And here's the main line. Because how does this get to our Gemara? Because our Gemara was saying that the chiddush is even when nobody uses it. Right? The chiddush of the Gemara here was that even though you have 4 doors and everybody uses only one, you still have to have on all 4 doors. So what's the case? Because the intention was when they built it, they had in mind for everybody to use all of them. So what happened? Even though over time people stopped using other doors, and now at this point, they don't need all doors. They only need one. So in other words, like this. What Rashi is saying is as follows in this latter explanation. When the building was built, when the room was built, they had in mind for all doors to be used by everybody. Over time, circumstances changed, and they only need one door.
One example, like a big family, and the children grow up and they leave the house.
And only one door is used now.
So they would call the emptiness. And,
yeah. So says the halacha, you still need mezuzah on all 4 doors. Why? Because when you built it, and you had it in mind, you had in mind to use only
all the doors.
To use all the doors. Which comes out like this. If you built a door with the intention nobody should use it, it's an aesthetic door, no one's going to use it. Yeah? And nobody is using it. You put it.
Is it functional?
It's a functioning door, but nobody uses it. It was intended as a aesthetic piece of art. I don't know.
So maybe you keep it locked.
Yeah.
You keep. It's also a lock that it uses very rarely. As an example, emergency door.
Well, okay, we'll get there in a second. Let's go in a second. Let's just go step by step. If you have a door, right, it was built with the intention nobody should use it, so it qualifies according to Rashi for the exemption, right? And nobody is using it, so it qualifies also according to the Rambam for the exemption, because according to the Rambam, the exemption was not based on what your intention was, but how it's being used. Right? Then according to everybody, you would know mezuzah. Or certainly you couldn't make a bracha. Right? If, however, now the question becomes like this. If you have in mind that nobody should use the door, but then later on people start using it.
According to Rambam.
Does Rashi agree that you have to have mezuzah? According to Rambam, for sure you have to have mezuzah. Because Rambam never mentioned anything about what you had in mind when you built it. But according to Rashi, would you need mezuzah? I don't know. Rashi says the question was intention when you built it. But maybe he might say that now that you're using it, you do get a mezuzah. It's not very clear. And the funny thing is that the Shulchan Aruch quotes both. It first quotes Rashi, but we'll go to Shulchan Aruch. This is the funny thing here. The Shulchan Aruch has 2 paragraphs, one after the other. First he says, if you have a home with many doors opened to the courtyard or to the public, and they were all built with the intention of exit and entry for all the people living there, they all require mezuzah, even though the people living there have now become less, meaning people have moved out, and now they only use one of the doors. This is direct lifted from Rashi. Yeah. In the next line he says, next paragraph, a home that has many doors, even though you're only accustomed to using one of them, you have to make mezuzah on all of them. It's the same law But the first time was quoted in Rashi's version, and the second time was quoted in the Rambam's version.
But none of them.
So what's the story with the Shulchan Aruch? What is Shulchan Aruch saying? Sorry?
No, but they were all originally had the intent to be used, right?
So the first half seems like he is taking into consideration intent, because he quotes Rashi. He doesn't mention clearly what your intention was when you built it, but he's quoting Rashi and saying that when you have entrance and exits, even though right now it's not being used, except for even though right now it's not being used, but because it was once used when you built it, that's what he implies. That's why you get a mezuzah. And the next one he says, you have a lot of doors, even though you only use one, you still put a mezuzah on all of them, without mentioning intention. Sounding like Rambam. So what's his intention? And the funny thing is that the Ramah writes in the next line, the reason why he said that is because you made it with the intention of going in and out. So the whole thing becomes very puzzling. So the bottom line is, it seems like the Shulchan Aruch is taking, so what it seems like the Shulchan Aruch is taking the pluses of both Rashi and Rambam. That is to say, we're going to follow Rashi with respect to intention. That is to say, if you had in mind for people to use it, even though no one uses it, still gets a mezuzah. And we're going to follow Rambam also, that regardless of what you had in mind when you built it, you're still going to put a mezuzah if someone uses it. So the only time there's an exemption is if both agree there's an exemption, which is the case I gave you at the beginning, where the person had in mind no one to use it and nobody uses it. Even though the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that line explicitly, that's what emerges. Because he brings Rashi and Rambam, so the way people understand it is the common reading of this Shulchan Aruch, is that he's taking the stringencies of both, or he's taking the applications of both. In other words, both Rashi's reason for why you have mezuzah, namely, you had in mind when you built it for people to use it, and Rambam's reason for why you need a mezuzah, namely, people use it now, irrespective of the fact that it was built one way or the other. In both those cases, you need a mezuzah, which means, in the Shulchan Aruch's version, where you have the split between Rashi and Rambam, or a possible split, namely, you built it with the intention for no one to use it, but now people are using it. And one might argue that Rashi says no mezuzah because you never had in mind to use it when you built it. But Rambam will still say you're using it, you still get a mezuzah because Rambam did not care what you had in mind when you built it. Right? So the Shulchan Aruch is quoting both Rambam and Rashi to tell you that you would have mezuzah there, because we're taking the stringencies of both. So mezuzah is put up either because you had in mind for people to use it, even if no one's using it now, or because people are using it, even though when you built it you didn't have in mind. Taking the pluses of both.
Intention or application.
So intention and application, Rambam and Rashi. Even though at one point there's actually a dispute, or a possible dispute, even though there are those that try to reconcile to make Rashi fit with the Rambam also, it's a little bit difficult. But of course there are people who do that. But this is the way it emerges from the Shulchan Aruch. Even though the Ramah says, even commenting on the Rambam's quote, it's only because he had in mind when he built it to begin with. Which means one might argue that in the Rambam's in the Ramah's reading, even though it's difficult to understand, and actually the Gra actually comments on this and asks why the Ramah is taking Rashi's side when the Shulchan Aruch just quoted the Rambam. The Gra asks this. But at any rate, if we're taking the Ramah at face value, which adds this line that says they only get mezuzah because they had in mind when they built it to be an entry and an exit point, you might emerge by thinking from the Ramah that if you had in mind to build for no one to use it, and now it's being used, maybe it's exempt from mezuzah. Might be.
That's my intention.
The Ramah seems to be going with just intention, Rashi's understanding. Even in the second paragraph, when the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam, making it seem like he doesn't care for intention, the Ramah puts a line in only if there's intention. The Ramah, the Ashkenazi glosses. So which means it might come down to a machlekes Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. The Shulchan Aruch is of the view we would take the pluses of both Rashi and Rambam, intention or application. Whereas the Ramah, the Ashkenazi glosses, is taking just the issue of intention, not the issue of application. Strictly like Rashi. But nonetheless, it seems from the post-Shulchan Aruch, post-Ramah authorities, as he collects them here in this Sefer, it seems like people still stick with the pluses of both. And even if you came to a situation where the only door you had was a door that you didn't have in mind for anybody to use, but now you're using it, that's the only door you had, you can still make a bracha even on that door. In other words, to save yourself the issue, what you do is you make a bracha on a door that you know everybody says you have to have a mezuzah, and you have in mind the doors that maybe some people say you have to have a mezuzah, and you put a mezuzah on all of them anyway. But what if you only have that one door? The one door you have somehow. So even then, there are those that say you can make a bracha and rely on the Shulchan Aruch, rely on the Rambam, where even though you didn't have a mind for anybody to use it, you can still make a bracha. Even though Rashi might say you shouldn't make a bracha. Hope this is clear somewhat.
So what would Rashi say if, just on the Rashi view, if you had no intention when you put the door up, that it would be used by anyone, okay, and then a year later you decide, I want to change my mind.
Yeah.
Would Rashi put up with Mezuzah at that point?
What?
I changed my intention now.
It seems like the answer is no. Unless you did some action to physically change the door. Now you rebuilt it. But it seems like no.
And what would Rashi say if he put up the Mezuzah and a year later he said, I decided I'm closing up this door is not going to be used anymore.
That's clear. Unless
take down the Mezuzah?
No. Unless you make it, no, because it goes by intention. That's Rashi's.
But its intention changed.
Doesn't matter. It goes by intention the moment you built it.
At the time it built it.
Yes.
Okay.
And the only way you'd be required to not do Mezuzah is if you actually took an action of shutting the door down. Not just if you decided and put a lock or key. That doesn't count. If you, maybe if you put a nail and nailed the door or something like that, maybe that would help. There's actually a specific qualification she mentions here. Where is it? And there's specific things you have to do to shut the door down. But I just want to add one more thing. So two more things actually. You mentioned about the emergency doors. So it emerges from this, according to many opinions, that emergency doors do not need to. If it's exclusively a fire escape, does not need a mezuzah.
Both intention and application.
Right, because it's intended never to be used, and application you hope to never use it.
Exactly.
So it doesn't require mezuzah because it has both exemptions for both Rashi and Rambam. Yeah. It's number one. The first thing I want to say. Another thing I want to say is that before I want to say at the beginning, but I want to make a correction from something I said yesterday. So is this clear before I do that? Yeah.
I just want to go back to the Rob's case where he had an exclusive door.
Rabbi, yeah.
Rabbi to the study hall. He didn't have a mezuzah there.
Right.
He didn't follow these.
So according to Rambam, the reason why I didn't have mezuzah is because it was a beis medrash.
Okay.
Because it was an exclusive door to a beis medrash. Whereas Rashi says because it was intended as an exclusive door for nobody else to use, irrespective of where it happens to be. And that's where Rashi gets this idea of intention.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to make a correction from yesterday. Yesterday I mentioned we were talking about a garden, a garden patch, not an orchard. What was the word using?
Vegetable garden.
It could be a vegetable garden or not a leisure garden, in other words, which is exempt from mezuzah. And I mentioned that if it leads, you have a garden, you have the beis shar, you have the antechamber, and you have the actual house, right? And we said that the halacha is that we view the antechamber as being in the service of the home, and therefore it does get a mezuzah even between the garden and the antechamber, right?
It does?
It does. Now I said that if the entrance to the public was from the house, so say you're going from the house to the antechamber to the this vegetable patch, right? So which side of the door you put the mezuzah on? I said yesterday that you put it on the right side because that's the way the traffic is going away from the public domain through the house to the antechamber, then to the garden. That's what I said yesterday because of the way the traffic comes from the public domain. But it seems like I was wrong about that, or at least it seems like it's unclear. And he rules that because it's in the service of the home, it goes on the right side, always facing the home. Even though, how did you get there? How did you get to the garden? You had to have walked through that way. But nonetheless, when you were walking to the garden, you weren't obligated mezuzah at that point, and therefore the right side going to the garden, no mezuzah. It's only once you're in the garden, now you're walking to your house, now you need it's almost as if we consider the garden as if it's a public domain, because there's no mezuzah required there. And then I'm standing in my garden, I'm standing outside, and I'm walking into my house, so it's the right side going in, even though the public domain is all the way on the other end. Clear? So let's go from left to right. You have public domain, home, antechamber, garden. So the only way to get to the garden is if you walk through all those things from the public domain into the house, into the antechamber, into the garden. But because the garden is exempt from mezuzah, we view that garden as if it's also a public domain. So it's almost as if it has two public domains, one on this side and one on this side. This side happens to be a garden and nobody else can get to except for me. And therefore, because this happens to be a public domain, when I'm starting in my garden and going into my house, I put the mezuzah on the right side going into my house from the antechamber.
What's that, the ohel? Going into the is there a mezuzah there?
Going to the actual oil?
From the tent going into the Is there a mezuzah? Because that's a public. That would be a similar situation.
Yeah, over there we would probably follow
you
the
went public into a private into a public again.
Yeah, so over there they might follow the Chabad way of following the hinges. Chabad follows the hinges except for the front door, so this whole discussion doesn't matter.
There is a mezuzah there, I think.
There's a mezuzah for sure. But I'm just saying this whole thing doesn't apply to a Chabad custom.
I wonder if it's on the outside.
Sorry?
I wonder if it's when you go back into the building, it's on the right side, or if it's when you go.
It would follow the hinges.
It
would follow the hinges, except for the front entrance. We follow the hinges. So another thing that emerges also from this we're discussing here is that if you had like a loading dock, right, and the only usage of that door is not it's only an exit. No one brings things in. It only sends things out.
No, usually you unload there.
Loading dock is you bring things in.
Bring in and out.
Right, but if you had
It's usually both, right?
No. It seems no. Even, that's right. No. Sorry. If there's a loading dock, which is not meant for you to enter and exit, it's only for produce for your
Bringing in.
yeah, for your shipments, for your goods to be going in and out. Then it seems like it's exempt also from mezuzah, because it also to do with whether I build it for the intention of me entering and exiting. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan says.
You loading buckets in a house or is it
No, in a business. In a business. A loading dock in a business. Anyway, it's a wonderful day, everybody. It's quite a. I hope I said before I want to make it fun. I hope it was fun and not too complicated.
No, it's good.
It's a wonderful day.